So, welcome, guys. Episode number 4 of Cyber Diaries with Marius. We have some amazing guests today with us. First of all, I think Tim Vincent is responsible party for introducing myself and guys from Chaleit. So, without further ado, I guess, guys, if you can do a little intro about yourselves, obviously Chaleit, and then we'll start kicking off and answering hopefully some of the burning questions and discussing obviously what you guys do with Chaleit, and we'll take it from there. So I guess
I'll go first. I'll go first.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you for having us, Marius. And by the way, really like the stuff you're doing. It's good, and it's a good platform, and very pleased to contribute. I'm Tim Vincent, the head of Observer Solutions. We're a consultative reseller purely in the cyberspace, and we like working with solutions that simplify and automate. And Chaleit have come to our attention recently as Pentest 2. It's literally a whole new way of looking at penetration testing. Excited to be working with them, and very interested in how they tackle some of the questions that Marius has got from today. So that's me. I'll pass on to Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I'm the founder of Chaleit, and some people would know previous companies that I was part of and co-founded. The first one was 7Safe, which we founded after learning our art at the London Stock Exchange, and then that was acquired by PA Consulting. And then there was another company which became pretty famous at Black Hat called Not So Secure, and that was acquired by Clarinet. And then Chaleit is a long-term project of all of ours, and it's based already around the world in 7 countries. And we've learned a vast amount doing this, but I guess we'll jump into that in a bit. Over to you, Roscoe.
Yeah, hi, I'm Roscoe, so VP Client Services here at Chaleit, coming to you from the slightly damp mountains of Austria. Not a day to be a tourist in Austria today. I'm responsible for doing the nice smooth bit with clients from getting people onboarded and plugged into the hackers who do the actual cool stuff. So I'm nerding out on enjoying what the guys do. It's a fun place to sit for me. Yeah, really enjoying being actually. It's great fun. We do cool stuff.
Brilliant. Thank you guys for a short intro, and it's amazing all to have you here. So I guess wanted to start picking some of these things up. I guess we can start. So obviously, Dan, as you mentioned from obviously your brief history, obviously you have successfully founded a number of cybersecurity companies, and obviously you have a keen eye for discovering, I guess, problems in cybersecurity world and finding a way how we can tackle and help organizations to solve those problems. So I guess if you can elaborate a bit how Chaleit is essentially doing its holistic approach to cybersecurity and how it essentially differentiates your services in nowadays what it is it's a crowded sort of cybersecurity market.
Marius, that's a really interesting question. And I think it comes from a function of when you go through and build companies, they take on their own identity and you learn in that process, right? So we've been doing this now for 23 years. So, and also going through acquisitions and going into very big companies as well has been very good in terms of that learning process. However, when we kind of dreamt up the idea of Chaleit, we wanted to do it differently. Not to be different, but because we could see that the market was moving on. We were in the middle of COVID. The buying condition was changing, and cybersecurity itself is changing. And one thing I am very, very mindful of is the fact that cybersecurity and pen testing can be referred to as commoditized now, but it's a highly skilled art as well. Why? Why is it referred to it as that? Because I think the world is now ready for moving on from point cyber solutions, where we sit there and be adversaries to a client and create them large sets of problems. Okay, some of the findings can be extraordinary, but at the end of the day, we are there for our client. So we went back to the drawing board and decided to build a company that was different, that would think with our clients. And it would take this point solution away and instead engage as a partnership properly, just as you would see the majors, the big four and the others sitting underneath that directly, the way they would have those high-level relationships and they would get it done. Now, the other thing that's, I think, very important in this as well is that we sit there and we learn, we listen to other CISOs and those who are stakeholders in these problems. And it's amazing if you do that, because they are the people with the problems and they are the people with the answers. And it's fascinating. Why our industry does not do that, I don't know, but it's quite an adversarial industry. So to answer your question, we wanted to build a condition whereby it was very grown up, if you like, the consultancy. It moved a needle on value. It moved a needle on making people more secure. It took pen testing skills and capability, but we flipped it to solve cyber problems. And when you speak to 4, 5, 6 CISOs a day, it's amazing what you learn.
Yeah, brilliant. I guess it's really important that, as you say, fostering relationships and learning, because I guess, and I guess we can bring in Roscoe into that conversation. Roscoe, if one thing I see sometimes where organizations are, sometimes I see, failing, is that we have a specific tool or solution, and let's see and try and change someone's problem to fit our tool instead of how normally should be done. Let's actually build something that's great. Sometimes organizations, I think, sometimes want or seek too much to get to 100% sort of fixing. You have to start somewhere and then build on it. So I guess, in those conversations and in that building that holistic approach, what have you guys, or what have you learned so far in that journey?
Yeah, a great point, and extremely relevant to the kind of conversations that we're having with clients on a day-to-day basis. That it's not about trying to fit your problem or your solution around their problem. It's like that sort of old phrase, if all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, right? And that really does strike me as being, that's the old school approach to, pen testing companies, or, pen testing, full stop, is what we do is pen testing, and therefore every problem that comes to us, we're just going to pen test it and hope it goes away. If you broaden your mind a little bit and think more, kind of holistically around cybersecurity as opposed to just pen testing, then there's a whole bunch of really interesting stuff that you can delve into. Yeah, fine. Pen testing is great. Hammers are great. Sometimes you need a screwdriver, right? And that's when you start getting into cool stuff like, potentially we might touch on this later, DevSecOps, for example. That's about as far away from pen testing as it gets, while still being under the cybersecurity umbrella. Totally different skill set required. Moves the needle in a completely different way.
Yeah, brilliant. I just wanted to pick up on that. So, we're talking about pen testing, and sometimes, I guess, what's the difference? Everyone does pen testing. But I guess, nowadays, and especially I think nowadays, in order not only to win business, but actually to sustain, a long-term relationship, you have to do something a bit better and a bit different. So on comes in Chaleit, Pentesting 2.0. So I guess, the question to either of you who can pick it up, either Dan or Roscoe to start with, but what unique methodologies do you guys think that you developed in your, in its pen testing and aftercare services, and how do you think these methods will ensure that long-term security resilience for your clients, instead of, I always see pen testing, and I think it's usually is viewed as that, it's either an annual assessment because you either have to complete some regulation requirements, and normally the problem is you always get different testers, there is no consistency, so it's just one-time assessment and you relying on that person's skill, because pen tester does not equal pen tester, because some of them will find specific things while others won't. So over to you guys.
Marius, it's a journey. Why is pen testing bought as single projects? It's because it's been driven by compliance often, and it's historically the way it's done. But it doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. If you look at cybersecurity, it's a gradual improvement cycle. That's the only way it gets done properly. And so if you can spread out the effort of pen testing and instead solve quite the problems that it's trying to address, and extrapolate that a bit more. And we replace this adversarial kind of nature of it, like we're better than you, we're the experts, with a different view, which is we're here to help, we're here to solve problems. What's bugging you? Okay, there might be some compliance down the other end of the road. Fine, we can deal with that. But it's about solving those problems. And really, the key thing is pen testing in its existing traditional format is very much cliff edge consulting. In it goes, it defines a box, it's very limited, and then there's a cliff. You hear nothing afterwards. There's a delivery. So many people say, you can contact us, we'll be on debrief, read out calls, etc. But really, do they happen? No. If you make that a long tail and you put yourself in the mindset of your client and the problems they are then trying to solve, there's a lot more in that tail, an awful lot more. It requires effort to solve the problems. It requires collaboration, solutioning. We need to think also about the way in which our clients' workflows and their pipelines work. So delivering them a PDF report and saying, this is our way of doing it, I think is old school, and that is commoditized. We need to be thinking about, what ticketing system they use, what workflow, who owns it. And then the other thing is, if we start talking to developers, we need to speak developer, not security, to these people. Extremely important. So it's very much a different type of model. Take a project, lay it flat, iterate, don't cliff edge it, don't be adversarial, work in partnership, think together. And the other thing that we have then learned, which is the magic, absolute magic that's come from this, is we are no better than our clients, but together with our clients, we think. And that art of thinking things through is where the special work is done, I think.
Yeah, I think it's well said. And I was just going to bring you, Roscoe, into that conversation. I think it sounds like, because obviously, normally, as we said, pen testing is one-time sort of thing, usually done. But if we elevate, and obviously for some organizations, having the internal team to do that, it's a big leap, but feels like having a great company to help you move towards some sort of form between red teaming, purple teaming, where you can have continuous feedback loop and closing your potential gaps in your maturity. It feels like that's the way to approach your program iteration, and not just saying, oh, we're going to do this application test because the regulation says that, we can't until it's pen testing. But there is no way and guarantee that whatever has been tested, it's foolproof. And obviously, once you published it, with today's development velocity, that application can be completely different in about 2 months. So whatever you pen tested, normally it lasts for about a year. That's as a proof, I've tested it once 11 months ago, and it's still, that's my certificate to glory. So what's your thoughts for that, Roscoe?
Yeah, I think it's madness. Some of the stuff that you see people doing is complete madness. I mean, if you had a car and it's blowing a black cloud of horrible emissions out the back of the car, and you take it for its annual test, and it fails the test because it's clearly spitting out pollution from the back of the car, you can't then say, okay, I tested my car, move on, wait until next year. All good. If you have a car, you have to fix it, right? Simple as that. I mean, where I'm going here, it's exactly the same, with security. I think it's madness that the requirement is to do a pen test, as opposed to, do a pen test and then fix the flaws that it finds. And that's what we're, talking about, is that there's absolutely zero value to be had whatsoever in generating, 50 tickets that don't get looked at. That doesn't do anything at all for your security. What actually does something for your security is closing the one or two issues that might actually get exploited in the real world, and boiling it down to let's focus on what actually matters, and then moving the needle and actually making a difference and closing something, is one part of it. And then, as you say, not doing it as a single point in time, but doing it as a sort of an ongoing thing where we're sort of cognizant of the fact that software is developed, on sprints, and new features are released every couple of months, and as you say, the app changes. that's a much more intelligent way of approaching this thing, so that it is actually secure. I mean, everyone that's been breached, you flick through the news, everyone that's been breached has done a pen test, right? Because they had to, because of the regulation. Doing a pen test doesn't make you secure.
It definitely doesn't. And going back to you, Dan, I guess, if we iterate and start thinking about, further reach of this. So, if you think about how Chaleit can help customers, and it's sort of protection service that integrates with the current, and we touched a bit about, workload and sort of workflow automation and how Chaleit can help integrate into your customer sort of infrastructure to help solve problems. But I guess the key point is I wanted to touch on and how you can potentially, guys, or how does your company help? Because and I wrote articles about it. I think the problem is that usually is, and nowadays we see more and more in our cybersecurity world is where we see a trend that cybersecurity budgets are going up, the spending is going up, but the breaches are going up too, because people are usually being reactive. And the problem is, the more money you will throw at it, there's less chance that obviously because you just firefighting. So how we can, with this new approach and being holistic approach, bringing that pen testing, communications, building relationships and actually helping customers. So how we can not only fix the findings, but how we can help organizations mature their processes that creates those findings in the first place.
That is so interesting. And I think the nub of this is in two prongs. Going to your article first, Marius, I really liked it because I think our industry is aggressive. It is fear-driven. It is, you've got to do this, and it's, we're the best. And that's not a good start if you think about any relationship between a client and a supplier, if you want to view it like that. So, number one, let's stop selling. Instead, let's start talking and thinking. I love the phrase critical thinking. Let's take a critical thinking approach to this. Let's not try and solve it all straight away. You mentioned about spend. There is so much spend in cybersecurity. And to Roscoe's point about breaches, in all the big clients we work for, as example, I use big clients as a specific phrase. They all have pen testing teams. They're lucky have red teams. They all have a plethora of monitoring and stack, if you want to call it like that. They're mature. We still get in. Why? Value. That's the nub of this that I really, really want to get to today. It's the value. These are investments, all of these things, including things that we do and all the SOC and other EDR and services that are there. However, they're not working. So very rarely do we ever find that these defensive controls really get in our way. Very rarely do clients even know that we're doing this work. So part of this process isn't just about looking at one specific lens and one specific point problem. It's about thinking about the overall posture of the company. What is the company trying to do? What is its risk tolerance? What are its drivers? What value is it not getting out of its existing spend? That is so crucial. We don't see SOC very much detect us, let alone respond. We see wonderful, wonderful tech stacks in EDR. Is it doing its job? Who knows? Often not. And so really, we need to be part of the team and start thinking critically on this and be able to take those skills and be technologists, not just cyber people, and certainly not just pen testing people, and help our client get in there and figure out sensibly where these zones of gray, oversight, undersight, and so on and so forth exist, and help them build a program that takes all these things together. They know their environment, they've got their tacit knowledge, we've got our wider skills, bring them together, stop trying to sell, and solve it together. And that partnership is where we see the big changes happening.
Yeah, and then we'll bring in Roscoe.
Yeah, I think as well there's a sort of return on investment thing here. I mean, these solutions that we're talking about here, EDR, MFA things, your SOC team, internal or external, these are 6, maybe 7-figure investments, right? it seems to me, like a no-brainer in terms of return on investment to spend four figures having a sort of double check of, okay, we've got this huge deployment of EDR. Does it do what we're intending it to do? You wouldn't do that with other things, right? For EDR though, people will deploy it, switch it on, leave the default settings intact, and they won't actually validate that it is protecting them, in the way that they think it is. The validation point is your return on investment, because why are you spending the money if you don't know if it's working?
Yeah,
Could I just, sorry to interrupt.
yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to just touch on something Dan said there and backed up by Roscoe that I think is important, Marius. It isn't Chaleit that's coined the phrase Pentest 2. It's Chaleit's clients. They've come up with that. And I think this question you've asked absolutely gets to the heart of where Pentest 2 is differentiated, because they're not just taking on some testing and delivering a report at the back end that shows their analysis output. They're not adversarial with the SOC. They're not adversarial with the tools. The way that Chaleit is working is in a combined approach with those people and those tools to iterate the best product from them that they can, so that by the time you get to the end of the test, you haven't got just a report, you've actually got an improved posture. And that for me is why I like Chaleit, and that's why our clients like Chaleit are arriving at a net improvement in posture. And I know you love all this, Marius. I know you prefer this approach because you're not into compliance for compliance sake. Sorry, I'll shut up.
That's fine. That's brilliant. That's brilliant points, and I was actually leading into that further. So, and I wanted to bring it down again. So we touched a bit, and Roscoe had a great point, and that's what I nowadays ask some of the CISOs and some of the security leaders is, it's very rarely I see that yes, people buying tools, but I really see we're doing metrics around, for example, vulnerabilities, incidents solved, patching, but I really see a metric that shows coverage of the tools of your estate, and B, the effectiveness of your tools. And I want to bring you into that because I don't know how you guys are aware or how you guys involved into things like chaos engineering, but I'm a big fan in terms of how you build resilience not only into your applications but in your security department as well. So you test all of your analytics, all of your controls, that they work as they intended to be working. But B, you can also start trying to inject faults to understand how your tools are behaving. So should something happen, you're not panicking, oh, what's happened? I don't know what to do because things don't work. You can plan and build resilience in your production and be okay when something goes wrong.
That is a scenario that we don't see very often, even in mature organizations. And here's the reason. Tim, I know you've got a phrase that you use, and I really like it, which is everyone is in pursuit of putting data on glass. And if you think about that, right, it's easier, perhaps, in a busy world with so many demands and an ever-expanding landscape in every dimension, in every stack, in every deployment, to say, what on earth do we do? How do we capture this? And you cast the net out, that net being a solution. And that net, as Roscoe mentioned, needs serious thought and tuning. But what alarms me personally when I speak to so many CISOs now is they're becoming, and their organizations are becoming, data analytics and data lake and data processing companies, not getting to the point of why are you doing this in the first place? Features and all those sorts of things is quite alarming. And so this cannot be solved with tech alone. You've got to think it through. This first. I learned that years ago. In fact, I haven't used this phrase in probably 20 plus years now. That first, that second. Spend second. Because that critical thinking that has those skills in it is absolutely crucial. And the more we keep chasing data, the more the problem exacerbates itself. And Marius, to your other point, we're going to miss stuff. Why is it that, and to Roscoe's point again, I mean, a client of ours recently, they are over $1 million US, a relatively small company actually, over $1 million US on a SOC. And on a red team exercise that we did with that organization, the SOC didn't even know we were there. And so you end up doing silly things like, running a password spray and then geolocating into bizarre locations just in the hope that they will see you. Nothing. So forget detect and certainly forget respond and totally forget contain, because where's that spend gone? So back to the point, glass is useful, data is useful, analytics are useful, but they need to be tuned. They need to be thought about. The people and the process component that then backs up what do you do with this stuff is equally important as well. Flying aeroplanes, Tim, I know that you've done a bit of flying as well. You practice your emergency drills. You don't wait until the engine quits and then go, right, let's get the pilot manual out and figure out what we're going to do. No, it needs to be thought through. And the problem is, I think, that the tech world now is very IT driven, it's very solution driven. And I think it's in part the fault of our own industry, the security vendors that have driven probably too much now into this space.
Well, here's an interesting, sorry, Maris, here's an interesting, kind of thought then, and interested to see whether you guys, agree with this or shoot it down in flames. But it seems to me that the trend, to this point has been more is more, right? More logs, more data, more, dashboards, then dashboards to monitor the dashboards, and yet more logs and yet more data. Are we at an inflection point where, people have got all the data they can possibly swallow? And are we going to get to a point where, hopefully it swings in the other direction and less is more, and we start boiling it back down to the original question, which is, are we secure? And, realistically, no one's ever fully secure, right? So what can we do to make ourselves more secure?
The problem is, if you look at some organizations, I think we also keep, we can keep, I guess we'll keep circling around to tooling. But the problem is, so for example, if you see, for example, a cybersecurity leader that walks into an organization and they want to reassess or improve maturity in an organization, they normally will pull up, say, something like CIS top 18. And they will say, okay, I have tools missing in 16 categories. Let's buy 16 tools. And the problem is, I always think about, it's always quality over quantity. And I think what Dan mentioned, I keep talking to people, cybersecurity, comparing to any engineering or any manufacturing, any other industry, is very mature. And we should take a lot of things from aviation in terms of user acceptance training. I think we don't do enough of deploying tools to make sure, our people can use them, but actually we can leverage them to the max. And they are configured the way, it's easier to, because sometimes, I always say to, for example, which I think sometimes people don't ask enough of the questions. I always ask one of the first questions I ask the vendor is, okay, I'm buying your tool. Now, how long does it take me to reach maximum ROI? If I need to spend 2 or 3 people, 3 months building that tool to optimum level, I'm not buying that tool, because I can't afford to spend 1 or 2 engineers, spend months and months configuring that tool to reach maximum, level of ROI. You have to have, as a vendor, you have to have a plan of onboarding and have a support mechanism that I can do most of the things hands-on to reach a certain level of ROI.
There's the word, Maris, ROI. And that's the thing I don't think many people, and certainly not consultancy providers, consider. They consider, we're given a project, here's a scope, here's a box, go test it. Not, what's the ROI? What are we trying to defend against? How many people sit there and come to Monday morning in the pen testing industry and go, right, what am I testing? There's the scope, right, off we go, run the OWASP top 10 and get all my favorite tools out. That's not thinking. It might have depth within it, but it's not threat modeling the application. It's not understanding the user journey. It's not saying to your client, what are we trying to prove? What are we trying, what's bugging you? What is in this condition that you are trying to make safe? So it's a whole, I think the industry has been built in its, let's call it stage 1, in a good way. But the word commodity is indicating there is a problem in their service providers. And to a certain extent, I also think that is now translated into the buyers of this stuff, because they go, cybersecurity, okay, I'll buy a pen test. You see, it's not solving the problem here. And it's not looking to the points that we've all raised here, which is validation, ROI, value, risk, safety, effectiveness of what you've already got. Roscoe uses this word internally. I absolutely love it. The principle of subtraction. What can we take away? How do we streamline? How do we make life easier? Why are we going to go and give devs a whole bunch of stuff to do when actually it's impossible because of their sprint components? And another one we hear a lot from CISOs now is, in fact, there was one the other day, it was alarming to hear from this. He said, no, can't do a red team this year. Why is that? He said, because I've already got so many criticals and my IT org can't fix them. Now that is alarming. Principle of absorption.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring you in, Roscoe. A few things comes to mind. So I think sometimes, vendors, consultancies, I think there are organizations that sometimes are at fault at this. But obviously we are in the business of making money, and that's important. But sometimes making money comes first before the relationship, integrity, and honesty. And we all know that once, if you put all the effort in getting a signature, chances are after a year that signature gets ripped apart. So I just wanted to, get your thoughts, Roscoe, about, how it's important to sometimes think about building relationships and longevity of that relationship. Because sometimes, I don't remember where, but I read some amazing quote in one of the books. I think it's something like Influence or something like that. They were said that person walked away from a contract that was like 50, 60 grand on the table because he didn't feel that the company needed that help. Now, the leadership of that company went to another company, and obviously because of that impression, they won a contract that's, say, 10x, because someone showed integrity, honesty, instead of trying to get the money for today.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it all. I mean, that's 100% the approach that we're taking to this. If we work with people and enjoy spending time with them, because there is a human element to this, and then help them do things that they're, and the majority of the people we talk to, they know what they want to do. They just, they've got their hand tied behind their back by budget or, by internal constraints or whatever. If we help people do the things that they want to do, then there's absolutely no reason for them to not continue working with us, right? It should be a no-brainer because we're adding so much value. That's the kind of super key principle here. And it's exactly as you say, it's much better to walk away from something that isn't going to help someone, because you want to actually move the needle and do all the right things and all of that sort of stuff. It really is as simple as that sometimes.
But there's a problem. Sorry to interrupt, but this is an absolute problem. Everyone wants everything now.
Yeah.
And they do put the profit over. There's the imperative, there's the reasons in the SaaS vendors. In fact, you and I were chatting it through, Maris, weren't we? I thought you eloquently put that together by saying the PE firms, the VC firms, they expect their return, and the drive is more and more and more return, and it drives that behavior. So making a quick buck in cybersecurity is very, very straightforward. Making a long-term revenue stream where there is a win-win for both parties that adds a ton of value, that's hard work.
Yeah,
but it's
and this is where you get these behaviors like sort of this sort of recurring theme of rotating your providers. I mean, I benefit from the rotating providers thing because people rotate off their current provider and onto Chaleit from time to time, right? Great, very happy with that. But I really do want to challenge that as a mentality, because what are you doing there? Well, you're trying to get a fresh pen tester to look at the thing. The idea being fresh eyes are going to find something new. Well, realistically, could you not have a conversation with your cybersecurity partner and say, well, Pentester X looked at this last year, can we get Pentester Y on it? You don't need to change firm in order to get a new pen tester on that. So why are people really rotating providers? They're not rotating providers to get a new pen tester. That's that might be what people say, but that's not what's in there. They're rotating providers because they're not happy. They don't feel like they're actually being guided and supported and taken through the long term sort of future, because what we're aiming to do, and hopefully we're successful in doing it, is to never be rotated out. And the reason that we won't, the reason that hopefully we won't ever be rotated out is because as we work with someone for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, we build up such a level of expertise on exactly what technology they're using, exactly how that interacts with the business, their use case, their environment that they're in, that we're a part of the team, and we're helpful. So we get better with time. So the idea of rotating providers to get a better service, well, it shouldn't be the case, should it? If your consultancy is really working with you in the right way, they should be getting better. The more time you invest in them, the more your consultancy learns. The more your consultancy learns, the more they can help you.
There's another contributing factor to that. I think obviously cybersecurity leadership is at fault too, because we all know, if you take a simple statistic, CISO's tenure at the company is 18 months. And CISOs tend to have a favorite suite of tools. So whenever they go into a new organization, let's rip everything out, put my favorite tools. But I think sometimes, and I think it's really thought about that, we all know that, only specific tools work in specific environments, and doesn't mean that if you've got a favorite pen tester maybe is a bit different kind of way, but if you're talking about EDR, SOCs, specific tooling on specific, platforms, that doesn't mean that if you walk into a new organization, it's going to fit. It's going to fit the ecosystem. It's going to give you value. It's going to integrate into all of the things that is around it. Because sometimes people forget, we are supposed to build defense in depth, and it should be layered instead of, patched. And whenever there is a gap in that defense or in the layer, that's where we're going to pay for it. But then changing tacks a bit, and I wanted to touch on this again, without plugging, I guess, too much, but, a recent article as well I wrote about, sales, Roscoe. So sales, and I'm discussing sort of how cold calling, cold emailing is dying down, and how community engagement and how delivering potential values and showcasing the brand is changing the sales. So how are you guys seeing, this new age approach of, acquiring customers?
Yeah, I mean, I read that article and agree 100%. I would advise everyone go read it and learn the lesson. And I don't want to say cold calling is dead. I don't want to say, cold whatever is dead, because I'm sure someone will prove me wrong by giving an example of how it works somewhere. But you know what? I don't want to do it. Why don't I want to do it? Is because the person on the other end of the phone doesn't want to hear from me. Just calling them. Particularly people who are working from home these days. They're making a cup of tea in their kitchen and their phone rings and it's me. Are they going to be very happy with that? Probably not. Well, just. Okay, well, it's deep dive. Why not? Why don't they want to hear from a random salesperson while they're making a cup of tea in their kitchen? Well, it's because there's no value add there. It's yet another person saying, "Oh, do you want to buy product X, product Y, product Z?" It doesn't. There's no value for the customer there, right? I think that the true way to go about this is to make connections with people. Have conversations with people, and be generous with your time, and be generous with your technical people's time, and go and solve their problems. If you spend half an hour on the phone with someone talking to them about how they might implement Cloudflare or whatever it is that you're doing, then that doesn't cost you much. In fact, it's quite fun. It's enjoyable having conversations with people and solving their problems. That's why we do our jobs, right? So you have a better day because you did something fun and you actually genuinely helped someone. It was nice. You were generous. You feel good, and then you build that relationship with someone. If you go and help someone and go and spend some time, building a real connection with them, then of course next time they've got some work, they're going to come talk to you, right? It's just completely evident. And just like cold calling, you have to make 100 cold calls to get one person to respond. Well, yeah, of course, going out and making real, genuine human connections with people, you can't just do it once and expect that person to come and sign $1 million contract. That's not how it works, right? But if you make friends with 100 people, over the course of the next couple of years, how many of those 100 people are going to need some kind of service from you, and they're going to come talk to you as their friend. And again, you're not going to win it all, but I would argue that your percentages are going to be way higher than going down this cold calling method, and the whole world is going to be a better place because you have meaningful conversations as opposed to being hung up on.
Yeah, I think it's important, as you say. I think the one thing that sometimes, people forget, however nicely you can craft the emails, it's very hard to showcase or come across as an expert in the field. But when you're having conversations, engaging in a community, because your goal to get conversations or to get an inbounds is to showcase your expertise in a specific field, the services that you are offering. Because next time someone says, "Oh, I need pen testing services," Chaleit sound like they know what they're talking about and they are an expert in that field. Let's have a conversation with them. So I guess
and challenging people, right? Sometimes someone comes to us and says we want to do a pen test, and we tell them you don't need a pen test. You need to do something else. You did a pen test last year. You still haven't fixed the vulnerabilities from that. What's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
And this is the thing, right? Challenge people.
Well, that's the only way forward. And I guess a question each for yourself, for Roscoe, and then before we move, before we kind of conclude this. So, I guess first, Roscoe, with the rapid evolution of cyber threats, where do you see the future of cybersecurity heading, and how do you think Chaleit is preparing to meet those future challenges in the next, say, year or two?
Great question, and here I am, recording myself predicting the future. This one's going to come back and bite me, isn't it? I think, every single, news feed about tech at the moment, you can barely move for stories about AI. So, I mean, AI has to be in there, right? I've already mentioned about how, we've been in a world where data is increasing and, there's dashboards to monitor your dashboards now and things like that. I think that what we're doing and, what I think people will increasingly realize they need to do is to put the human back into it. These automated things, even with the best, kind of AI tools and everything else, you need a human to guide that. You need a human to find the edges of the places that it's not looking, the dark corners of whatever, that sort of stuff. That's human driven. And again, if you go back to looking at what gets companies breached, well, that's social engineering, right? It's the good old phishing attack, it still works. And so I think that the human being is undervalued in cybersecurity, and I'm looking to see that bounce back, and that's 100% what we're trying to to bring to the thing. Very, very good humans acting as humans.
Yeah, I think it's very important to people forget that with ChatGPT, AI, LLMs is there is a key point in there: trust but verify. And there's one very big thing that recently came out. I don't know if you guys saw, but NVIDIA CEO said that people should stop learning programming and study biology and all other things because we won't need to do code because AI will do it for you. But the thing is, and that's the key thing is, how are you going to verify what AI built if you don't have those skills? And I think this is the key point where it's converging into the point where some of the skills might be lost because we're just going to trust this machine to build stuff, which I think is wrong. But that's another conversation for another day. And finally, I guess, Dan, a question for you, again, looking into the future, what emerging trends in cybersecurity, are you most excited about? And I guess how Chaleit is planning to leverage these trends essentially to enhance your service offerings to your clients?
That is a seriously interesting question. And where we've prepared the business, Marius, we've kind of thought long term. We have decided to keep this business as a human business, as Roscoe said. So irrespective of those trends, there is something that is going to be, and to your point on AI, so key, which is original thinking, critical thinking. Everyone wants a tool that scales and gives you, 20x in return. We're not interested in that. We're interested in being around a long time, building a deep value base, being trusted by that, and therefore being able to flex our thinking and our skills to help clients validate that very thing you described. And if you look at it, there are some very, very big consultancy firms in the world that have done exactly that, and they've scaled beautifully on that IP. Take McKinsey as an example, that sort of wrapping their brains around their clients and solving problems. That's the space we want to be in. That is insulated for the future. It's a harder game, it's a deeper game, and it's one that uses a word I absolutely adore, which is compounding. You have to invest to get better and better at it. So I think that's our insulating factor. And that is something I think that will continually drive value, and it's going to be needed more and more, not less.
Brilliant. And I'm going to bring you, Tim, in for the last, sort of roundup. So as a, value-added reseller and partner of some, some of these amazing tools that are bringing in over to the UK, how do you see, what you see? Because obviously you are always in contact with the customers and third parties. How do you see, the near future shaping in your world?
To pick up on the Dan thread, a lot less around the newly emergent sparkly bauble type of solution that I think you mentioned earlier, Marius. We've all probably been a little bit guilty, been sucked into thinking is the next best thing, and it's not a solve-all item, but it definitely looks glossy on the surface and makes the right pinging noise. A lot more progeny, and there are tools emerging from companies that have got deep dive progeny, not perhaps McKinsey-esque, Dan, but certainly at levels of maturity, and they've been around for many years doing a piece of functional work that then lends itself to cyber, as opposed to a few ex-defense guys, no disrespect to them, emerging and popping out a solution which happened to work for an element of the Israeli army, God forbid. We're finding that there's a deal of traction to be had from borrowing great depth of experience and skill in sector Y and transposing into cyber, as opposed to pure play cyber solutions just sitting in and solving one point issue. And I'm sure that the more work we do with Chaleit at the testing discovery, the more of the sort of thinly layered tools we're going to uncover, not actually contributing real material vendor enhancement. And the big word at Chaleit is this materialism. Let's find material improvements in the posture through the step changes, as opposed to thinking we can solve and find quick wins, low-hanging fruit, or all of that should be displaced by a progressive movement in the correct direction using well-informed, well-thought-out solutions. So hopefully, hopefully Observer can contribute to this more thought approach to cybersecurity as opposed to rapid step change. So I think that's where we're coming from.
Brilliant. And then I guess, Dan, to round up, if people thought the conversation was intriguing and they wanted to find out more about Pentesting 2.0, Chaleit and its services, how can someone approach, where they can find you, how they can, start a conversation?
Well, a good resource actually we're rolling out is our blog. This blog's really interesting because we're learning from CISOs around the world. There's another 10 or 12 articles queued up ready to go already on there. So that's a really good resource, because not just us, but go and listen to some of those CISOs. They are really smart people and they have solved a lot of problems. There's a good summary written for each of them, and then there's a video if you want to delve into the detail. But chaleit.com is obviously the point of contact there, or LinkedIn. But the key thing is, we don't want to sell to people here. What we want to do is figure out what are their problems and how can we guide and help them to change their cyber world. And that is a very, very different play. And that is, I think, authentic, sustainable, and will last.
Brilliant. Okay. Brilliant, guys. That's another episode in the books. Big thanks to our guests from Chaleit, Roscoe, Dan, Tim from Observer. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll be back soon.
Thank you for having me.